Hi, my name's Marc Gee, and I'm reading an extract from my book Declaration of Guilt. And so it started on a November's night just after the Second World War in 1946. The drunks who propped the bar up with the blazing stump were a mixture of granite-faced dockers, prostitutes past their sell-by date, and lost souls who had survived Hitler's Luftwaffe and the Blitz. Stale sweat mixed with black market perfume cut through the haze of cigarette smoke which floated around the walls and scratched the surface of the sawdust floor, which over the years had seen its fair share of spit, broken glass and spilt blood. In the shadows of the docks rows of bricked warehouses and flour mills were on either side of the alehouse. Opposite, silhouetted against a full moon and black sky, stood the giant cranes of the shipyard. The stump was the natives' home from home. They were people of the night, and on this Friday night they were no different from the hundreds of other Friday nights where they got drunk, thrown a few punches, or hitched up their skirts down the back alley for a few extra shillings. Through the pub window, a flickering street light cut lines across Len Hutton's craggy face. Heavy set, he'd sat alone at a bar stool, sipping his pint, his eighth of the night. Watching the alcohol take hold around him, he pulled on a woodbine and coughed a chesty cough, a smoker's cough. Approaching 60, he'd seen it all. An ex-merchant seaman with a button nose, receding grey hair swept over his head and nestled on the shoulder of his leather jacket. Crooked yellow teeth stained from years of nicotine matched his yellow shirt and his baby blue eyes, which convey 1,000 seafaring stories, from fistfights in Hong Kong through to feeding basking sharks in the Straits of Gibraltar. As the calluses of his large hands wrapped around his pint, something caught his attention out of the corner of his eye. Swivelling around on his bar stool, he leant forward and wiped the condensation from the pub window with the palm of his hand. Squinting through the blackness of the glass, he struggled to focus through the reflection of the window and the glare of the streetlight. Outside in the shadowy cobbled street, he saw a streak of light. It looked unnatural, surreal. Then the realization of what it was hit him like a thunderbolt. As the hairs stood upon the back of his neck, his eyes widened, a look of horror sweeping across his face. Jesus! Springing to his feet, the pint slipped from his grasp, sending an explosion of beer and shattering glass across the wooden floor. Crunching the smashed glass under the soles of his leather boots, he barged through the drunks, spilling beer in his wake. Someone shouted, "Fight!" Usually, not this time. Crashing through the double doors of the pub, Len was hit by the smell of the sea and a vision that would haunt him forever. A few hard hitters looking for a piece of the action staggered after him and froze in disbelief. What seemed like a young girl was engulfed in flames. Staggering across the road, one of her shoes skidded across the polished cobbles, her high-pitched screams cutting through the air like a knife. More drunks fell out of the pub and watched as Len ripped his jacket off and stepped towards the human fireball. A trail of flames clung to the girl as she spun around in circles before smashing into the warehouse door. Crashing to the ground, her skull smacked the curb with a tortuous crack. Dropping his leather jacket over the burning girl, Len fell to his knees and started beating his hands on the epileptic body as it bounced violently up and down. A woman screamed, the smell of paraffin and burnt flesh poisoning the air. The palms of Len's hands started to burn as he frantically thrashed his jacket from the girl's head to her back, then down to her thighs and legs. Of what seemed a lifetime, the flames were eventually smothered. Len choked, his face smudged with black smoke, his eyebrows and eyelashes singed by the intensity of the fire. Defeated, his hands shook as he benevolently placed his jacket over the girl's head. Some of the women turned away, horrified by the sight of the girl's body and her screams, which had now died along with her young life. Exhausted, Len climbed to his feet and looked down on the body as it twitched for the last time. The palms of his hands were arid and strands of hair were entangled inside his burned fingers. Feeling dizzy, he could hear his chest wheezing as the air fought against the smoke in his lungs. Len was suddenly nudged to one side as the beer-belly landlord tipped a bucket of water over the blackened charcoal figure. He was too late. The water brought a hissing and cloud of steam into the cold night air. All that was recognisable was the girl's shoe, resting in the gutter, a small black lace-up, and the hem of a smouldering dress. The shrill of a policeman's whistle zipped in the ears of the huddled crowd. A baby-faced copper barged his way through the silent onlookers. Out the way there, let me through. Looking down on the corpse, he whisked his hand across his mouth and nose as the smell of death drifted upwards. Turning white, his stomach churned. Spinning on the heels of his polished boots, he pushed his way back through the spectators. Falling against the pub door, his legs buckled as he curled forward and wrenched up his guts. He wasn't the only one. Overhead, the pub sign of the blazing stump swung and creaked as a cutting wind blew. Paint peeled, the sign showed an old sea dog slumped drunk in an armchair, a pewter mug of ale spilling out of his hand, his wooden stump in flames in the hearth of the open fire. Ironical. A comforting hand patted the back of the policeman's shoulder as the heavy voice of the landlord came from behind him. "Are you all right, son?" Wiping his hand with the back of his mouth, he slowly recovered, his eyes bloodshot and watery. Turning to a scruffy kid wearing a peaked cap that shadowed his eyes, the landlord spoke in a yielding voice. "Go to the station as quick as you can, lad, and ask the desk sergeant. Tell him what happened here." The kid ran off, the tail of his coat flapping after him, his clumpy boots thumping against the cobbles. "Come with me." The landlord escorted the ashen-faced policeman into the deserted pub. Macabrely, a couple of drunken stevedores, oblivious to anything, were still slumped at the bar singing an out-of-key sea shanty. As the landlord stepped behind the bar, the policeman felt beads of sweat trickling down his brow. Running his hand across his forehead, he caught his reflection in the mirror at the back of the bar and noticed a splatter of vomit across his shiny silver buttons of his police tunic. As he brushed his hand down the front of his uniform, a shot of brandy was slid across the bar in his direction. He nodded a thank you to the landlord's fat, ruddy face and knocked the spirit back in one. The brandy was harsh and caused him to take a sharp intake of breath. One by one, the drunks filed back into the pub, sober, mortified, lifeless eyes, some of the women sobbing uncontrollably. Catching Len's gaze, the policeman turned his back as embarrassment turned into pent-up emotion and shuddered through his body. Gulping hard on the acid at the back of his throat, he gripped the bar for support and found himself sobbing uncontrollably. In the blackness of the night, Heather Wilson's family received a knock on the door. It was the devil's knock. Within seconds, a sister, a brother, a mother's lives would be destroyed as the detective relayed the news about the grim discovery of their loved one. Asked to identify the body, the girl's father stood over the charred corpse. His eyes bled, scratched with tears. He could only recognise his beautiful daughter from the bottom of her flowery dress and the single ringlet of her hair, matted and charred. Breaking down, he turned to the detective, at the same time trying to find his voice. "Have you got him?" "Yes, sir. We arrested him this morning." "Will the sod hang?" "He'll swing, sir. We'll make sure he does."